Chapter 40. Boundaries and Confusion. Leviticus 19:19. But ye shall keep my statutes. Thou shalt not let thy cattle gender with a diverse kind. Thou shalt not sow thy field with mingled seed. Neither shall a garment mingled of linen and woolen come upon thee. Leviticus 19:19. This is a law with a long and curious history. Repeatedly in history, men have recognized its truth. More than a century ago, when the first edition of Robert Jameson, A.R. Foster, and David Brown's A Commentary, 1864 to 1870, appeared, it was noted that mingled seed had bad effects on and was injurious both to the soil and to the plants, and that garments of mingled linen and wool were unhealthy. In our own time, non-Christians have warned us of the health hazard in mingled clothing. People, however, both in food and clothing, have been more governed by styles and tastes than by God's law and health considerations. This is especially noteworthy because God promised an abundant blessing for faithfulness to His law. According to Wenham, man must keep separate what God created separate. This means a ban on alliances with ungodly nations or marriages with unbelievers, and on attempts to negate the validity of God's kinds, that is, by attempting to produce hybrid animals. The order of the world is God-created and sacred. Man must do his work within the framework of that order. It has been a constant temptation to attempt to overturn that order. Thus, about 40 years ago, some men claimed that they had succeeded in breeding mules, or so one creative evolutionist insisted. God's law, however, is against confusion. We are told in Deuteronomy 22:9-11, Thou shalt not sow thy vineyard with diverse seeds, lest the fruit of the seed which thou hast sown and the fruit of thy vineyard be defiled. Thou shalt not plough with an ox and an ass together. Thou shalt not wear a garment of divers sorts, as of woolen and linen together. Another application of the same requirement is given in Deuteronomy 22:5. The woman shall not wear that which pertaineth unto a man, neither shall a man put on a woman's garment, for all that do so are abomination unto the Lord thy God. God's fundamental order must not be despised or violated. Homosexuals, feminists, and many scientists are determined, however, that God's order must not stand. Many efforts have been made over the centuries to undermine these laws. Since the law forbids the gendering of animals with a diverse kind, beginning with the rabbis and through generations of commentators, it has been held that buying and using mules is not forbidden, only crossbreeding a horse and ass to produce one. This is like saying that it is illegal to steal, but not illegal to receive stolen goods. Again, it's said that because the high priest wore both linen and wool, priests were exempt. The law, however, forbids mingling the materials, using cloth of mingled threads. This law begins with the declaration, Ye shall keep my statutes. Statutes is kukah, a decreed limit, an ordinance. It is translated as ordinance in Jeremiah 33:25. Hertz wrote that the word may mean here, as in Jeremiah 33:25, fixed laws which God had instituted for the governments of the physical universe. The purpose of the following regulations would then be, man must not deviate from the appointed order of things, nor go against the eternal laws of nature as established by divine wisdom. What God has ordained to be kept apart, man must not seek to mix together. Bush said of the prefix, Ye shall keep my statutes. These words are here inserted lest the ensuing ordinance should be deemed of little moment and so neglected. We tend to regard that which is unimportant to us as of minor or no importance to God. Bush noted, and to seeds, it would in many cases be very improper to sow different kinds in the same spot of ground, as many species of vegetables are disposed to mix and thus produce a very degenerate crop. Thus, if oats and wheat were sown together, the latter would be injured, the former ruined. The turnip and carrot would not succeed conjointly, when either of them separately would prosper and yield a good crop, and if this be all that is intended, the precept here given is agreeable to the soundest agricultural maxims. It is ironic that from time to time men are determined to prove that such laws are mere superstition. They sow various vegetables between the rows of young vines or fruit trees, with sad results. As Scott observed, these practices might be considered as an attempt to alter the original constitution of God in creation, and the law may not unaptly be regarded as implying a command of simplicity and godly sincerity in all things. More than a few scholars, such as Nordsey, treat this law with condescension. For Nordsey, it is primarily directed against what the Israelites considered to be unnatural associations. He concludes that this law was an inheritance from a distant past, just as our society still has customs that ultimately derive from a similar mode of thought. Far more discerning is Euler's comment. The traditional division of the law of Moses into moral, ceremonial, and juristic laws may serve to facilitate a general view of theocratic ordinances, but it is incorrect if it seeks to express a distinction within the law and to claim a difference of dignity for the various parts. For in the law, the most inward commandment, "Thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself," stands beside, "Thou shalt not sow thy field with two kinds of seed," Leviticus 19:18 and 19. That Israel must be holy like God is the ground alike of the command not to be defiled by eating the flesh of certain animals, 11:44 following, and of the command to honour father and mother, 19:2 following. In fact, the ceremonial law gives special expression to the antagonism of the true religion to heathen nature worship by showing that while in the latter the deity is drawn down into nature, in the former what is natural must be consecrated and hallowed to God. The whole law in all its parts has the same form of absolute, unconditional command. Before the making of the covenant, the people had the choice whether they would bind themselves by the law that was to be given, but after they pledged themselves, all choice is taken away. Because of this strictly objective character of the law, human judgment cannot be allowed to make distinctions between the different precepts. Whether such distinctions are to be made can be directed only by the lawgiver, who appoints, it is true, a severer punishment for certain moral abominations, and for the transgression of such precepts as stand in immediate relation to the covenant idea, for example, circumcision, the Sabbath, etc., than for other transgressions. But so far as man is concerned, the most inconsiderable precept is viewed under the aspect of the obedience demand for the whole law. "Cursed is he that fulfills not the words of this law, to do them." Deuteronomy 27:26. These laws forbid the blurring of God-created distinctions. The nature and direction of sin is to blur and finally erase all the God-ordained boundaries. Man's original sin, Genesis 3:5, was and is his attempt to deny and obliterate the distinction between God and man. Homosexuality, bestiality, and a variety of other sexual sins have as their purpose the obliteration of all such boundaries. Many of these offences, including bestiality and incest, have been mandated by pagan religions as the essential affirmation of man's freedom from and defiance of God's law. The violation of the boundaries set by God's law goes hand in hand with the savage insistence on obedience to man-made laws. Violations of tax laws can sometimes now lead to more severe penalties than murder. As we trivialize God's law, we see the exaltation of man's law. There is an inner logic in man's statism and lawlessness. The insistence on denying God-given boundaries has many facets. In the mid-1950s, an economic analyst, Baxter, predicted a growing emphasis on unisex. Since then, we have seen the denial of the differences between male and female and much more. God's laws are case laws. If vegetable seeds are not to be mingled, nor an ass and a horse crossbred, then in the human realm it follows that the confusion of God-ordained boundaries is even more serious. The boundaries set by God shall stand. Those who deny them shall destroy themselves in their denial of the fundamental order of being.